Right, thank you, Donna, and congratulations again to all the winners. Really, your importance to Shepherdstown just can't be overstated. So I also want to thank Jody Bromwich, who runs the Bird Center for us. His assistance is invaluable. He's the technical expert, and we'd be helpless without it. So really appreciate everything Jody does for us, and the Bird Center for hosting these events. Much appreciated. So it's my honor to present tonight's speakers, Steve and Harriet Pearson. They're pretty well known around town. Steve's now the editor of the Observer, and both of them have been wonderful contributors to the community overall since they've moved here. I'll let them tell their story. We'll also have a chance for some questions and answers at the end of the presentation, I think, right? You'll hang around there. And what can you say about the Opera House, how critical it is to our town and quite an important structure, and how wonderful it is that they've been working on it for all of us. So, Harriet and Steve.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Is the mic on? No, it's not. Is yours on?
Let me see.
Can you hear us? Yours not. Okay. Testing. Hello? Jody? Jody, can you hear me, Jody? Jody? You testing? Am I on? Okay, very good.
Well, Harriet's testing. I also want to thank Donna
Absolutely.
and the Historic Shepherdstown Commission
Yeah.
for inviting us. Because I've had the opportunity to work with this team. It's wonderful. One of the things that she did mention, in addition to the museum and all the projects, they have a wonderful archive.
Yeah.
And it's like the town's shoebox of photographs and news clippings, and spent a lot of time there. And one of the reasons we were able to do this project is we were able to actually find a lot of references and photos and descriptions. So it was actually very helpful. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is wonderful to see so many people. Steve and I now live in Shepherdstown, and for the last several years, we've been undertaking a project with Steve really in the lead on the renovation and the rehabilitation of the Opera House. And we want to tell you a story this evening about a place of many dates. And that's the Shepherdstown Opera House. In the oldest town in West Virginia, it is one of the historic buildings on German Street, Main Street. And it's a place of many dates, as all historic buildings are. There are a lot of dates that went into its, from its start to now. There are a lot of milestones. It's also a place where probably some of you in the audience remember having a date, many dates. We have heard from couples who've gotten married, or at least gotten love, fell in love in the Opera House. And for us, it started off as a date. We went on a date to see some music. We really liked the place. We thought it fit with what we wanted to see, and we loved the place. And we saw it was for sale just the day after. We had a lovely time there, and that was the weak point right there for us. So we have embarked on a journey. We are substantially through some of that, and we'll update you all as a community today and give you a little bit of a glimpse of what's ahead. But first, maybe let's set a baseline so that we're all, this is a historic society, and we want to be providing a little bit of historical context here. So I'm going to do a little bit of that and turn it over to Steve. So first, what happens in your head when you think about Opera House? What image do you see? And is it something like Jody?
He's in his office. Do we need?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Space bar?
I don't know.
Space bar.
Space bar? Jody? That's interesting. Oh, there it is. I saw it. Got it. Okay, it's on here. You might have of a delay. Jody? I see it on the screen, but not on the screen. Anyway, what happens? who can actually tell me, what do you see when you think of Opera House? What do you know what it stands for in the, you see the stage, you see opera singers maybe, right? And some of you, yes?
Visiting lecturers.
Whoa, okay, this is a sophisticated crowd, because a lot of people, when I've traveled and I say we're renovating, we're restoring an opera house, this is what they say. Oh, you were, why is there an opera house in a place in West Virginia? The opera is old, I mean, really opera, and it's really not that, it's really about this. It's about a period of time in American history between the 1870s and the 1920s, where thousands of buildings called different things, but frequently called opera houses, were built in many, many small towns, cities of different sizes, obviously in the larger cities. I mean, some of us may have been to the Metropolitan in New York, the opera houses, but really in the smaller towns and cities across the United States, many were built as centers of culture, centers of gathering, centers of community. And after the Civil War, that movement really took off. And so when enough people in town had enough resources, they would pool the resources, or an enterprising entrepreneur would put it together and the resource and build something. And what Opera House means in that context is something we had no idea about. But when we started researching, we found this wonderful book called Local Glories, written by a wonderful Washington, DC based historian and land use planning expert, and Satterthwaite, and we consumed it. It's a long book, it's very detailed, and it tells the history of opera houses across the United States, and it lists Shepherdstown Opera House in it. And it's like, oh wow, we got one of those, it's here. And what we discovered is that it was vaudeville, it was lectures, it was Jenny Lind going across, if you remember that historic singer singing, it was also a gathering place, and they were frequently built in centers of town with the entertainment or the forum for gathering upstairs. Downstairs at the main level, usually a store or some other post office or government
Something to pay the
entity.
bills.
Something that helped to pay the bills. Although they were selling tickets, these were money-making enterprises in the main. They hoped, right. So Local Glories, and what Shepherdstown Opera House represents is one of the last ones in the era that were built, actually, and it was once one of the smallest ones. And this is a photo for those who are, I hope folks on Zoom can see the slide. This is German Street, and it's not, you can't see it very well, but can you point, Steve, if you can? The structure that existed before the Opera House is in here. It was a small wooden home.
This is where the press room is now.
That's the press room.
This is where the tattoo shop is. And you can see the two buildings with Murray Hall. But there was a house, little porch.
So it was nice. Imagine going back 1909, very quiet streets and all that. 1909, a gentleman named Upton Scott Martin, U.S. Martin, very prominent citizen, was enterprising in the Max. You know the Shepherd Mill, the grist mill. He owned that building. He there you go. He figured out how to get that wheel moved to its current location from many feet down the way. That was one of the things he did. I think he was the mayor for 6 terms of town. He was an elected official representing this area to the state of West Virginia. Jan is shaking her head, yes, good.
Got the gas station built, got the train station built.
He's responsible for a lot of things in this town. So a very interesting figure. And I love the fact, and I think you can see U.S. Martin somewhere in the town on one of the buildings.
It used to be up there.
Oh, there you go. That's where it's. So he buys the property. He tears down the house, and within
There was
6
no landmark commission.
So in 6 months, the building is up and open. just 6 months. And one says, well, how does that happen? Because we've been at this for more than 2 years now, but it's, but it kind of helped that there was no plumbing, there was no electricity. The privy was, I don't know where, in the back. The seats were very, simple benches, not the seats that some of you know, it was just simple benches. And, there were, he brought in folks and various people came in and out. There was a story we read about where a few of the local policemen pulled their resources, and bought a hand-cranked projector to show movies. And it was a family theater. It was built as a family theater. So they got together and they hosted, or they allowed the community to come in and watch.
It was a place, it wasn't a
Silent
church,
film,
it wasn't a bar or a saloon.
Yeah.
Like under the Antler, it was a place where you could bring your family.
Right. Yeah, so it was that, and there were some live performances, but this was about 3 years plus it was operated that way. Then,
This is what town looked like after the.
that's what the town looked like. There was a lot more liveliness. Yes, there were horses and parties,
The
and you
streets
can
were
see,
still lovely, but we didn't have the
when you
dance.
point to you can see the building, right?
So-
You can see it? Here?
Here.
There it is, yeah.
See the arch, that's it right there. So this is the restaurant building, and that's the second building right here.
And this is the area, let's see, the Jefferson Security Bank was in the Billmeyer building.
Yeah,
just
they-
up the way.
They hadn't opened up the new building until 1912.
Okay, and the Antler Hotel was open, doing a booming business before the fire, I think, right? So that's, there you go. So what happens in 1914? Mr. Musser and his family moved in. And Mr. Musser was from Pennsylvania. He came from a family of typesetters, topographers. His father had worked for a company, work printing in Pennsylvania. He comes to town and he brings the skill of knowing how to set type. And he has a newspaper called The Independent. And he rents the space in 2014. A few months.
1914.
I'm sorry. Oh my God. 1914. he rents
Sort
the
of
space.
stand still when you get into a project.
And the newspaper moves in, he takes over the theater operations, and we don't know what happened, maybe it was a handshake before they moved in, but he takes over the operations, and so now there's a single operator, he doesn't own the building yet, he's renting it.
So the newspaper's up here on the 3rd floor. So all the equipment, they haul it upstairs. All the newspaper, every week they haul it upstairs and they print. And there's no air conditioning up here. And no heating either.
The white there is, this is obviously a profile of the building, it's from the press room side, so the white shows the existing.
Yeah, this is what it looked like.
Existing
This is
building.
the building. Yeah.
So it's the press room building that was known as another liquider, the liquider
This
building.
is the general store.
And then you could see the rest of the opera house sticking out there.
So you can see the printing was hand cranked too. As with the movies. So
And
it's
that
still-
the green box is an excerpt of what are known as Sanborn maps. And when we started this project, Steve drove down to the Library of Congress in Washington and looked through the Sanborn maps and retrieved a whole bunch of information and maps that show the progression of the building over time. So that was kind of useful, actually, as we started the rehabilitation, as we'll talk about. The Mussers moved in with their 2 sons, Willie and Charlie, to the 2nd level, where there was an apartment. And
They built it.
they built it. They built it themselves, and then a few other things happened. He starts putting in some good things like a new projector, which in those days, again, hand cranked, but silence movies. Anything else on this one? So examples of what the outside looked like. 1916, you could see a interesting image of a woman involved in the suffrage movement. And what is interesting here is that you can see this interesting sign that's poking out.
Which is
And
never passed today.
Office of the Independent. So they're advertising the newspaper as being there. A bill on the right.
So her name is Eudora Ramsey. And she came to town to give a lecture Might have been at the Opera House, might have been at one of the churches, and the paper chronicled the story. So this was during, the suffragette movement. They were actually marching in the classic suffragette costume. And the band,
White.
it's a parade, it's a banner she's carrying. So, a PR photo.
Yes. And this on the right is a sample of playbill.
Well, what that's saying is it's a grand reopening. So what down here, it's saying the theater has been scrupulously cleaned and disinfected. So we were closed during the first pandemic. So, we're just looking, when you look at the building like this, you see the echoes.
Yeah.
And the cycle of history. And it's like we step back in time somehow and step forward in time. And we're doing the same things.
Yep, right here. I suppose Mr. Musser's business must have gone well because he is able to buy the building. So, or Mr. Martin might have gotten tired of owning it. I don't know which, right? But the Mussers buy the building and they start doing some, as anyone would, renovations and investing some more into the building. And 1926 was an interesting time in American history, as most of us know. I mean, there was a transition from silent films to talkies, and you could see the glimmers of that coming. And what Mr. Musser and his family did that was good for them was to see it and act on that insight. And so they started projects to install a new projector and actually a quote unquote sound system, primitive obviously for now, but they put something in there that would enable that transition to occur. They had a marquee up here, put in a marquee for the movie theater, put in some other improvements, including generator boiler, heat, enclose the porch in the rear above the stage. For those that know the building, if you go to the back, there has been a back porch, and they enclosed a little bit more space on the second level so that they would enlarge the apartment of the usable space. And importantly, I guess the research we did fixes that oriel window. If you walk down Main Street and you see the bump out, the bay window, which is called an oriel window, this particular window was built for Mrs. Musser for her sitting room. So it was a nice gesture, for the lady of the house that it was built, but we fixed it to be at this point in time having it built.
Based on what we could see from the maps, the standalone fire maps.
Yeah. So that's a piece of original research that Steve did. So we hope we're right, but that's what we think. And then what seems to happen after this point is that after the 30s, up until the late 1980s, there really isn't much change in the structure itself.
Other than it generally falling apart.
Right, natural entropy and chaos that comes with any building, but really the major investments that were made by the Mussers were around this time. Cool. Yeah. Some more history. Do you want to talk to any of these? Steve?
Well, this is 1922. Roughly 100 years ago. So you can see the types of films that they were showing, and romances, westerns, big, dramatic, productions, and we still have live performance. So this is an ad for a singer who came performing live. So again, it mostly film, but still it was a performance theater, and you can see there's wonderful graphics back then too. There you go.
I love the "Are you going boy crazy?"
Yeah.
And especially this one, Wednesday and Thursday. Why men forget. Anyway, so a lot happened in the world, and it would be weird to characterize the 1930s to 50s as anything having to do with stability in the world, clearly. But for the Opera House, from a structure perspective and what happened there, it was stable. The business model here was established. The Mussers were operating a newspaper, and they were operating a theater, and that they did it for a core part of their lives. And according to local historians, including the one that was honored here, Mrs. Lowe, we've heard, and maybe others know better, that typical movie fare was something romantic, something nice for date night on Friday, and some action Western type of film on Saturdays. And, families and everybody would go to town for the movies, primarily movies at this point. Business must have also been good for the newspaper. In 1942, Mr. Musser et al. Buys the Licklider building, which then became the press room, and moves the operations, expands, and puts the administrative offices first into the press room. And we know we
And
have,
then typesetting and then other presses.
eventually. But still, the press was still on the third floor of the.
Typesetting was on the third floor, and they
Typesetting.
had a press behind the movie screen at one point, and
Yeah.
just kept buying equipment, I guess the equipment wears out.
Right.
And we just got tired of moving stuff up to the third floor.
So now they own both buildings, and that's important for the renovation, I think, or the work, to remember that. But technology moves on, and we all know that, movies became big business, and big movie theaters, air-conditioned movie theaters. And while it had heat, the Opera House did not have air conditioning at this time. Competition is taking a toll, and
And you can see this in the ads for movies, but you see ads in the
Yeah.
cooler months, and then come June, there's a
Mhm.
lot fewer ads. You can tell it's just not, people aren't going to this little hot house.
Yeah.
in the middle of
And you
August.
could see also that there are theaters coming in Martinsburg and in some of the other bigger cities. So the Mussers closed the theater in 57, and it goes dark. They
And
continue
there are
with,
other reasons too. I mean, there were, the theater was over-segregated. And there's been, we've heard it, we can't document it, but, that was an issue of like, well, that would require additional issues. So the thing wasn't worth keeping open.
it's unfortunate, but but whatever the reasoning was, it shut. And the building then stayed inside the theater portion, stayed pretty much as it was until 1986 or 7. Right about there. The building, both buildings continue to be used by as a residence by the two Musser sons. One was in one was in the press room. When the two sons passed away, they had not had children themselves. And the Musser family was out of Pennsylvania, other places. And I think the research we did showed that the estate then involved a lot of people. And the estate managed the disposition of these two buildings. And the Opera House was sold to a gentleman named Jack Scoots, who owned it for only a few years. And Mr. Scoots came in with ambition and with it, wanting to do something bigger, do a dinner theater, combine the buildings. There are some drawings. They show pretty grand plans, but the only plan he was able to execute was the renovation of the independent offices that were on the third level of the Opera House, all the way up top, converted them into some version of apartments. Not really very well, I would say, and not really very legally, probably, for sure these days. But they turned into residential things. And then he sold the place, ran out of money, and sold it to a couple who motorcycled into town. And the Berries, Pam and Rusty Berry, and Pam is here with us. Where are you, Pam? Yes. Pam currently owns and operates the Shepherdstown Sweet Shop and Bakery, which is a wonderful institution here on the same street, German Street. Rusty is pictured here. And they buy the Opera House. And I don't know what your reasoning was, but it just seemed like the right thing to do, right, Pam? Yes. So we have a lot of wonderful memories generated by the Berries as they operated this place for over
Almost quarter century.
almost a quarter century. And we're very grateful. We've heard many wonderful stories about families, the memories generated. Saturday morning, drop off your kids at the Opera House, go do your thing, that sort of thing. And we know that they refurbished the living quarters on the second level, changed the look of the theater a bit. And we opened it in 1992. So that was a productive period of time between 87 and 92. Updated the technology with a modern projector for that time, new sound system, and later the digital projector because movies went digital eventually. So that was a wonderful period. Fast forward, we want to get into the rehabilitation. 2010, new owner, filmmaker Larry Cumbo, Lawrence Cumbo, many of you probably know him, buys the Opera House and operates it until early 2018. And the bar that, if some of you may remember, was added by Larry. And he also oversaw the creation of a green room, or enhanced the green room for talent on the second level in the back. And at this point, the entertainment mix was shifting. I mean, the movie business is a tough business for small buildings. So most of the performances at this point were live music. So it came back to its roots in terms of bands coming in, that sort of thing. Some films still, but mostly live. So this picture probably reminds some of you of, because it certainly was pretty much what we saw when we came in, except on this side, the bar had not been installed yet, and that was changed. So this was pre-Larry putting in the bar, but it's what you see from the stage. So what happened then?
We bought it.
We bought it. That's it.
Yeah.
So this is the start of,
So the fish landed in the boat and
Right.
the boat got.
yeah. So by the beginning of 2018, March roughly, we owned it, started operating some shows. And then the great flood of 2018, you may not have heard of it, but it did happen. So May of 2018, a washing machine hose broke on the second level in the residence. And the next morning, 5,000 gallons had rained onto the floor, the ceiling. I mean, it was just from the second level down. It had pooled in the middle. It had rained, literally rained on the theater, and the theater was totaled. The whole that part was totaled, and it was very sad. I would say it's very, very sad. And Steve, you posted this on Facebook. And you were optimistic. You Serve Pro started drying the thing, and we'll be back soon. We'll be back soon. And that was May of 2018. And we will be back soon. It's been a few years. So at this point, what do we do?
Yeah, so this is what it looked like the day after, by the time we got the drying thing in here. And then, okay, the water's not coming out, so we started opening up, well, this wall here, because it would seem damp. Okay, so it's still not drying out. So by the time, within a week, we had half the ceiling down, half the wall down, because it's a metal ceiling and lots of insulation and drywall, so the water just ponded up there and it wouldn't come down. So, you know, we didn't want to open up the metal ceiling because it's like a can. Once you open, you got to keep going. But as soon as we opened up, we realized why, because it started just pouring down more water. So the building was just damp. I mean, it was like going to New Orleans without leaving West Virginia. So, you know, that was like, all right, we opened up a lot of walls. So one of the things we started seeing is when you open up walls, there's things you really don't want to see. So you realize that we needed some professional help. So we were working on another project.
We really did need professional.
Yeah, so we were working on another project with an architect and engineer. So we said, well, come on over and give us a structural analysis of the building. And, you know, we also thought, well, you know, we should call up the fire marshal and you know, he needs to tell us what we need to do here, because, you know, we knew once you get past a certain point in the building, you've got to bring it up to modern codes. And this being a commercial, and you put 200 people in there, you turn off the lights, get drunk, and like, what could go wrong? Well, so the fire marshal looked at it and said, well, you know, you've got some problems here. And then, you know, we went over and talked to the landmark commission and said, well, you know, you got to do this and so on. So we got a lot of stuff here. So what we found, the building had to be brought up to codes. The fire marshal said, you got to put sprinklers in the building because it's tall. And you're putting all these people in there. It's like, well, what are we going to, you know, we're gonna put sprinklers, well, then you can't use the building as a theater. You know, use it as a retail store, you can use it as a residence, but you cannot use it as a theater, you don't put sprinklers. And more importantly, we found the structure was good. So once we opened up the walls, we realized that things that were supposed to be there weren't there. So, you know, we started looking at, well, why is the roof like sagging? So we
We
uncovered.
did buy it as is, so there was
Yeah,
no
yeah, but no,
issue.
and
We
we
knew.
actually had an engineer that came in and looked at it, but you can only see so much when the walls are, you know. So we went looking for the roof, you know, it's like the roof is sagging here. So like, okay, well, let's just see what the conditions of the supports underneath. This is a roof truss here. So where's the supports under the roof? You can see I'm pointing to this here. There is no post. There should be a post. This is a wall. There should be something really thick right there. All the way down to the ground right here. I said, well, that's odd, you know? And then we got up in the attic and looking here. So this is the roof. And this is the top part of that truss. And this truss is supposed to be up here. It's supposed to be flush with the top of this. So that's a 5.5 inch sag. This is 4 inches wide and 16 inches deep. And that bent, cracked. And there's 3 of them, they're all cracked. There was a giant bathtub up on the roof. So every time it rained, the water would sit up there and just push it down, push it down, push it down. It's this bizarre limbo contest. And, you know, and then we look next door. So we're talking about the press room. So when they built this building and then they expanded the building back, they put an addition on it. And, you know, being, you know, parsimonious, they said, well, you know, we don't really need to do another wall for that building. We have a perfect good wall on this building. It's kind of where we need it. So they just tied in the supports for the structure. So this is a beam going out of the Opera House. It's actually tied into the wall of the Opera House. And then they didn't quite get the beam in the right place. So they kind of put a few more. This is the roof over the kitchen. So what you see when you look in through here, that's the kitchen below that. So there's actually there's no wall between the kitchen and the restaurant next door and the auditorium right here. And it's just a drop ceiling. And so when we showed this to the fire marshal, he just said, well, got the building. Can't do that. And then we had plumbing problems, you know, there's plumbing through the walls, so there's wiring problems. And you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but these are studs here. And they kind of do this S thing. I think I've seen these in your house too. And they kind of do this like, so there was not a straight line in the building. And you know, so at that point, we're like, okay, what should we do, Mr. Engineer? I said, well, I think the best thing to do is cut the front of the building off and brace it, tear everything else down, build a new building behind it, and just bolt it back together and pretend nothing ever happened. So, yeah, okay, you know, but I'm not sure the HLC will like that. But they don't care about the front of the building, so maybe it'll pass, and maybe we can do something. So, you know, we were, you know, we're traveling around this time. You know, so we kind of like pondering, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do with this thing? So, you know, you can talk
So
about.
we
Decided to take some time off and
we-
travel
we-
around the country, when you can still travel.
we traveled, we were traveling, I was traveling for work, we were traveling for pleasure.
Weddings.
But whenever we went someplace, armed with that book, right, we carried around the book. We said, let's find the Opera House. So we went
There were
to,
4,000 or 5,000 across America, so that's easy, you know, well, you think they'd be easy to find,
right,
but what we actually found.
we're in New Jersey. We were on our way back from the beach, driving back. We were passing a town and I said, wait, look, there's an opera, you know, there was a sign. And I said, wait, so we sweared over and looked it up and it was a lawyer's office. And then we
With
went
a
to another,
picture.
you know, it had a little,
of-
yeah, but it was broken up inside. It was configured for working in cubicles. So it was a lawyer's office. Well, okay, great. I went up to, the Northeast and some small towns, similar thing. I mean, these had been covered, repurposed, torn down. This picture is the Tabor Opera House in Leadville, Colorado, which is I think it's the highest
It's like
town
10,000 feet
in
of elevation.
Colorado. It's
Silver
an
lining.
incredible place. If you've ever, I mean, I got dizzy just walking around. It was so high. This building looks like it's also having problems, frankly, but it is now owned by a foundation and is being restored very, very, very slowly, but it was just one of the most fascinating things. And it's not being used as a theater so much, but it can be. And that's an ambition. So they had an ambition to do it in the years it's gonna take to
Yeah,
come.
the 20 or 30
But you
million.
can see the history and it's fascinating. Google this history. It's a love story that has a very tragic end.
Oh, what we found is that, so if there were 4,000 or 5,000, there's fewer than 100.
Yeah,
Actually,
And-
still operating
handful
as theater.
that are in the hands of private owners. So we felt somewhat inspired actually by this and said, and we felt, an emotion that I'm sure you all feel that's very effective with us. We felt guilty. We felt really guilty. We said, we can't just make a big box inside. That doesn't seem quite right. So we came back and we went to do more work. Or
Yeah, so
actually, Steve went to do more work. I
so
just,
we hooked up with architect out of Morgantown, conservation specialist, Musser. I said, okay,
Mills, yeah, and they're here now, but yeah.
they're up on the Drum Street. So we did a 3D scan of the building, top to bottom, inside out, and like that was kind of amazing. You like to see how crooked the building was. And we opened up a lot more walls. Okay, we're gonna find every single problem with this. It's like, wow, I didn't lay the sawzall here. And we documented everything we found. So we found, old wallpaper, pieces of plaster, old wiring. So just how the building was put together, and they tried to puzzle it. And then we, we looked at what we could do with the building. And we found a lot of problems with it. And we thought, what was it worth? But we go back one slide there. So I found there's this pile of drawings here. It's kind of faded. You probably saw them too. I couldn't figure out who it was, but I found the name and I Googled it. And I found a number. I called the guy up. His name is Mark Orland. And I said, I see your names on these drawings here. I said, you know anything about this building? He said, yeah, I remember that project. Yeah, but I'm actually just in the process of retiring and I'm throwing out all my files. If you can come down here next week, I'll give them to you. Otherwise, they're ready to go in the dumpster. So I mean, literally that week he had them in boxes. So I guess I'll be there tomorrow. So not only he had these drawings, we also had photos too. So we're like, oh wow. So with the photos he took in 1988 were, basically after the theater, it was like this is what it was there before it got reconstructed. So it's all right. So we have something to work with. And we found out. Which in this drawing, actually, all those walls are still there. So it's really like, okay, we thought, okay, this has all been, just reworked. But there's actually a fair amount, something that we could work with there. So we thought, well, if we just preserve the theater, we should rehabilitate it. It's a working theater, and preserve what we can. But just sort of, it seems like let's try it. And then we dug a little deeper. And we found like some of the original colors and little bits of plaster, enough for us to recreate it. We found some walls that were buried between the blue thing that's up on the third floor is hidden by some drywall. They found the wall, just put drywall on both sides of it. It's been hidden there since 1985. And we were crawling in the dirt underneath there, and we figured out, this floor was originally flat because when you look, this is the beam that was sitting under the floor here, and this is the foundation. It's like, well, nobody builds that on purpose. I mean, so we figured out that when they converted it to talking films, they raised the floor. Because we found the original floor joists where they cut them and then they just jacked it up, and you can see it's like they just put them, like the beam you saw before. It's like I need a 6-inch piece, not a 4-inch, not a little smaller, So they shimmed it all up. So it gave us some thoughts about how we could, redo the building. And so we spent a few months, and so we spent 2020 pretty much room by room, what we would do, how we would organize it, because again, over time, it started out as residence, and then a film theater, and then kind of the performance space. So they come to a show, you're running all over the building. There's just lots of things that didn't quite work. Hired an architect, went to the HLC, did a workshop, went to Public Works, planning and zoning, lots of permits, details, tax credits, talked to the fire marshal.
There was a pandemic also.
Yeah. So by September, we were ready to actually pick a contract. And then we had to do some remediation because of course, always find asbestos and things like that. 'Cause they put a boiler system back in the 30s. And most of that came out, but there was still all the stuff we didn't want still there on the floor. So from January to December, we were finally ready. So right after Thanksgiving, the guys showed up on site to start the construction. So from 2018 to the end of 2020, in 2 years, it didn't seem like that long, but it was almost 3 years just to get to the point of actually, where we knew what we were going to do.
And we
how
lost
we
some
were gonna
time
do
with the pandemic, but not too much.
it.
Yeah. So, and off we went. So construction began right at the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021, and we are now in May. So it's been ongoing, and thankfully the surrounding area, the whole community has been very supportive of the constant, driving and contractors and all of that. So thank you, Shepherdstown, for that, and visitors. But we don't have time today to go into a lot of the details, but maybe you can hit some high notes and low notes.
So one of the things that we're really, most proud of is, again, the theater was built with no plumbing, no electricity,
It was anti-accessible.
Right.
Right.
And what we've been able to engineer in here is a barrier-free access from the sidewalk for people of all mobility types through the front door, through the lobby, into the theater, into the auditorium, right up to the stage. So, anybody. And that was this forever. Because like one of the guys suggested, well, maybe you should do that in wood. I said, well, I want to do it with concrete, so it's here. No one can ever take it away. And we found some interesting details like this. A lot of original materials were still there, just painted over. So we're just going to we restored the floors. We found the waste not want not. Packing crates became the building materials. So this is the address, U.S. Martin, Shepherdstown. The wood was delivered by train, and they used every single bit of it. We even found packing crates for the original chairs used as braces and shims. And that's how we know what the original chairs were like. We found ghosts of the original building. So this is the building next to the current press room. You can see right here there was a chimney. This is the back porch. They whitewashed the brick wall, where the porch was. So as you can tell, because this is finished mortar in here. Back here where the house was is unfinished. So they built the press room building up against this wooden building when they built it. We found how they heated the building. So again, this is the wall of what is currently as the press room, and there's a couple chimneys in there. As we were pulling up the floorboards and the carpet and then the luan, and we found like these dark spots on the floor. So let's open up the wall, and sure enough, they had put stoves into the buildings, and they had borrowed the chimney of the building next door to put the food on. So now how did they heat this whole building with one stove? Well, they cheated.
But he owned it, it's fine.
Yeah. And we put lots of steel into the building so that back wall that kept falling down, and it fell down, probably in the 30s, and it fell down, in the 90s. So we've got 3 steel structures inside of the building at different places. The back wall is not going to fall down anymore, no matter what we put on it. And we put the sprinklers back in. So the whole building is sprinkled. This is us dealing with the town of Shepherdstown's pipes. This is our new.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So,
Appreciate that.
it's been a big puzzle, but the building's 21 feet wide, but we managed to fit a lot in, and what we're hoping is we can fit a lot more in. That all the fun stuff.
So we anticipate the construction work to be done this summer. So in the late summer, there will be no grand opening, but we'll start using the building. And this is the new logo. This is a logo that's been adapted, and the phrase we've been using to mainly between the two of us, saying what is this going to be, but we're sharing it with you. World debut of the phrase that we're using with you is that it is our historic theater, use the word our, as our community's historic theater is intimate, friendly venue, seating 100, standing 200, intimate, friendly venue for everybody, accessible to everybody, is updated to this century to provide an amazing experience for artists and audiences alike. So that's our vision. Music, performance, film, yes. Everyone asks, are you gonna show movies? Well, somebody's gonna show movies. And you know, that TBD how, but yes, it's configured, it will have sound for that. We've made sure that it's got modern attributes, including for streaming and podcasting or recording things. So there'll be that capability as well. So more to come. The summer is going to be, taking some baby steps out. And our intent is really to make this a community space. So Steve and I have no background in theaters. We have no particular background, but we are passionate about converting this into something or bringing it back to what it was, because we love this community and we really have.
That's where it could be too. I mean,
Yeah, what it could
it's had
be, yeah.
ups and downs, and that's the nature of every theater, and
Yeah,
have the
so we're
opportunity to-
open for ideas, open for collaboration, and we'll be looking for that as well. So we thank you for coming out and seeing it.
We have a question now.
And in case it's not completely obvious, this montage is kind of cool. It's sort of, you can see, no marquee, no marquee, and the different evolutions. It's really, sorry.
Okay. Now I have two questions. My first question was, you're hoping for seating for 100. What was the seating before?
So the original, in the 1920s onwards, the seats you see there now, there were 20 rows, 5 on each side on the main level, so 200 seats, plus anywhere from 30 to 50 in the balcony. So, again, and only one door in and out through the front street. So, it was pretty tight, and no air conditioning. Yeah.
And are you keeping the neon trim?
No, that's that was sort of like a add-on, or there'll be lights, and there'll be a lot of drama. It's a theater. We have that license because it's a working theater. Not just gonna put candles in it anymore. But no, and music, everything's LED and digital now. So you can put a lot more stuff in space.
What's on the second and third floor now?
So our thought was, since the building started out as a theater on the first floor and like a commercial rentable space on the third floor and residents on the second floor, it's like, that's a pretty good plan. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna live on the second floor, rent out the third floors. I'm sorry.
Oh,
And yeah, so it's keeping the building is going to be used in the same sort of basic pattern. And the beauty of having the space there is when we have performers, we can house them on site.
Yes.
How did they fix the truss issue?
So hydraulic jacks, and of course about over a week, like a 1/8 of an inch at a time. And we got the roof jacked up so the roof is flat. And then so on the top of those 4-inch wide braces, each side of them has two 2x16 LVLs. And so the whole 4, and we both put that all together, on top and bottom, and then we braced it again. So, and then we put lots of posts underneath each one, so it's pretty solid now. So the engineers coming. More questions?
Are you adding on to the back of it also?
So what you see in the back, there was always a stair in the back. If you think about it, nature calls, you don't want to walk out the front door, walk all around the alley and all that. But there's an open stair. And at one point, there were stairs all the way up to the third floor, because obviously they had the press production, and I talked to a guy who was actually the pressman, the typesetter rather. He worked on the third floor, he apprenticed, set the type, to take the trays down through the back stairs, you know, to the press down behind the stage, and then the press next door. Then you would go back upstairs, bring the paper down, you know, on the back of the door. And so, but in order to bring it up to modern building codes, the fire stairs have to be protected. So sprinkler enclosed, so that what you see on the back there is a stair shed. It's really just to house the stairs. Yeah, just take up a lot of space. The stairs have to be, it can't be this wide anymore. It can't be like this steep. They have to be like little tiny steps and wide.
Wow.
And the footprint, you see it in there. So ironically, that was the footprint of the boiler. So they put it in the 30s, they put steam heat in. Well, they didn't have a place to put it in the basement, so they put a big brick block building, which you probably saw. I have a picture of Rusty on the back of like knocking away at this thing. So we actually only expanded the building back about 3 feet from the footprint that was there previously.
How many square feet is the building?
Well, it's 21 feet wide in the front and 100 feet back, exactly. So it's about over 2,100 square feet.
Same dimensions going.
Yes,
All the way out.
and then it steps back a little bit on the second, on the third floor, but it's that's what we want.
Any questions on Zoom?
I don't see anything. So anybody on Zoom who can hear, if you want to pop anything into the chat, I am monitoring it. And, but I don't see anything else here. One of the uses with the, you know, remember the independent was housed upstairs. I don't know that it's karma or whatever, it's a coincidence, but we also, in another weak moment, we bought and now publish, and Steve is the editor of the Observer, which is a monthly publication that goes across we mail it to 13,000 plus households across Jefferson County. And so far it's been operating out of our kitchen. But we will be housing it, the files, the archives, the operations of it in the second floor of the Opera House. So it's a reunited. Everybody who's eagle-eyed, almost 2 years ago, we bought the Observer almost 2 years ago, and we've changed its name. So I don't know if anybody was sharp-eyed to see on the masthead, it's the West Virginia Independent Observer, and we did a little tribute there to what it was, because we eventually wanted to reunite it with its home.
I'm just curious, I guess with all the updates, you'll have to have handicap-friendly bathrooms.
Yes. Yeah, and handicap accessible ticket booths and, you know, door openers, and yeah, that's part of it. We really wanted to make it accessible, because I think part of it is like, this is gonna take a long time, we didn't make sure that we can actually use it.
Did you keep the popcorn machine?
We still have the popcorn machine. And we'll put in beer taps too. Yeah. How much money?
No, go ahead.
I had 2 questions. One, did the work looking at where the butt to the press room building, is there damage that needs, you know, did it unearth damage there too? Or?
Yeah, we fixed the outside of that wall, and a lot of like, you know, people just like, I need to put something here, I'm gonna take this brick out of the way. You know, and you take too many bricks out of the wall, it ain't a wall. So, yeah, we sort of have worked together with our neighbors to sort of like, because all these buildings, if you go up and down German Street, they're all high together. And what happens on one end especially will affect, you know, well, leaning and all that.
And then in the projection room, I went up there one time, there's like a big, is that thing still there?
The projector?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, you guys bought that, that was used, I believe. That was like a 1960s style projector.
Yeah, it was designed for a small venue, private venue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
like a
it's
screen
exactly
room.
that with the Opera House, which is coincidental, very lucky.
Yes, because the lenses are hideously expensive on this. So it's still there only because It's too heavy to move.
How would you get
But, yeah, it was a digital projector, but so actually our projection is coming from the rear now. So, you know, we can, you know, that's the beauty of digital, you just put it right on the back wall and it's out of the way and, you know, a lot less expensive than getting something that can throw, you know, 100 feet, you only have to go, you know, 15 feet.
We have a question from Zoom.
All right.
The question is, what will the seats be like?
Sam and Rusty did such a good job on installing those seats, because I saw pictures of them, they were pretty nasty. After sitting there for 30 years. And they sat in the theater after it flooded for like a couple of weeks, and they started growing. Drink in with beer and all that, and then you put it in the humidity thing and you crank up the heat, it's like, wow, it's fuzzy, that is not a good thing. So we got them off site, we got them all clean, they're sitting in storage. We're gonna put them back in, and we're gonna engineer a little cushion that snaps on the top, like an airplane type seat, like a memory foam, so I know, you know, to go pick up your cushion as a pile, it's a fun thing, but it's just easier to sit down. We want to keep the seats, you know, the original there, you know, and they're
They're
part
not
of the fabric.
original, but they're from the
1920s.
1920s.
Yeah.
So it'll evoke, and the color, the inside, I'm not gonna say what the color is inside, but it's exactly what it was in the teen 20s.
Yeah.
So it'll be walking into the past. The seats will be cushioned though for our modern sensibilities. A little bit cushioned, but it'll be
Oh,
a
we want people
somewhat
to get up and
authentic
dance, so they won't be
experience.
too pushy.
Right. And there'll be a way that they're not fixed permanently,
Right.
right? The seats will not be affixed permanently. So if it requires it, they will be slipped away and moved into a compartment that Steve designed under the stage. So it's pretty clever. He did it pretty clever. So there's a second question, and it says, and they say, as we made our way through the repairs, did we find any interesting artifacts such as a treasure map or anything? That was a nice question. Thank you very much, Rebecca Phipps. And you want to talk about the middle?
Not much. I mean, really,
There was some.
they're just little coins, bottles, but you know, I don't know if you guys ever found anything as you were digging through there, but it didn't seem like it was a place that had a lot of, you know, it wasn't a storeroom or, you know, a store or something like that. We found old pieces of newspaper, you know, there's stuff that was flying around. We did find like the original some movie, some music scores, things like that, but nothing that, you know, there was nothing like, hey, we can pay for this now. 'Cause we just yeah. A lot of stuff you didn't want to find. We found a lot of rock. Because our original plan was actually to, you know, have storage below, and, you know, after 3 weeks of beating on this stuff, like, you know, well, forget that, you know, we're just pouring concrete right here.
That's
So,
it.
all right, well, let's show our appreciation. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. There's cookies and water in the lobby, and feel free to socialize. And if you aren't a member of Historic Shepherdstown, think about joining. So, thank you very much.
Would you like your plastic?